Hello. To kick it off here, I'm Rien Bertheim, and I'm your moderator. And I would like to ask or first of all, thank all the ONC folk here in the meeting for being here and taking questions. But maybe first ask the ONC staff to introduce themselves, and then please, you can just unmute yourself, turn on your camera, ask any question, or you can use the session Q&A and type your question, the Whova session Q&A, and I will be monitoring the session Q&A for your questions. So please, Mark, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me? Great. Okay. Hey, hey everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Mark Nee, working in the Office of Policy at ONC. Over the last couple of years, I've focused on information blocking. So I'll be answering most of the information blocking questions that you might have, and just looking forward to a good conversation.
Al?
Sure. My name is Al Taylor. I'm a medical informatics officer in the Office of Standards at ONC, and I'm the technical lead for US CDI and the US CDI version promotion system.
Thank you, Rachel.
I'm Rachel Nelson. I am a branch chief in ONC's Office of Policy, also focused on information blocking complaints, as well as some other aspects of the program. I've been around ONC a long time, but expect most of the questions on folks' mind today will be around our recent rulemaking.
Thank you, Rachel. John, will you go next?
Hi, yeah, my name is Johnny Bender. I'm at ONC in the certification division in the tools and testing branch. I'm a public health analyst. I help to write the G10 standardized API for patient and population services, and I'm the SME, the OTAC SME for G10, and then also SME for the ECQM C criteria and the public health F criteria.
Thank you. Kate?
Hi, Kate Tipping, branch chief in the Office of Policy. Was responsible for managing the development of the rule, also focused on a number of the certification criteria. Thank you.
Thank you. Avinash, nice to see you here.
Hello, this is Avinash Shanbhag. I'm the acting director for the Office of Technology in ONC that is supporting the certification program. And I'm glad you called on me because unfortunately I have to drop off for another call, but you have the SMEs on the call, so they will be able to take on all your questions between my colleagues in the Office of Policy and Office of Technology. But sorry about that. I just got a note. I need to step out of the meeting immediately. Oh. Sorry about that.
So you were just here to introduce yourself and then you'll leave.
Yes. Sorry about that.
Is that the same for you, Steve, or are you here to stay? Stephen?
Sorry, yeah, it's Stefan.
Oh,
yeah,
Stefan, sorry.
No,
Steve's not here. Sorry, Stefan, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you're talking about Steve Posnack or myself, yeah. Stefan Kanya, I also work in OTEC. I'm a senior innovation strategist at ONC and lead a lot of innovation, portfolio type activities, working with startups and entrepreneurs, developers. And also more relevant to this DevDays session, I also lead for ONC, the FHIR at Scale Taskforce or FAST initiative, looking at scalability of FHIR-based solutions and what are some of the technical and regulatory barriers to that. So glad to be here.
Thank you, Stefan. And I was going to go next to the right of you is Isaac Fetter, but he is not with the ONC. So I think we have everyone here and we're ready to take the first question. Who?
Rien, there's a few in the Q&A on Whova.
Yep. Thank you, Isaac. So why is the inability to segment data as a privacy exception for information blocking, especially as data segmentation is optional for certification criteria, I guess. Not sure if I'm reading that right. This is by Kathleen Connor. Kathleen, can you maybe
Yes, hi.
explain
Can you
your
hear me?
question? Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, and the question is, one of the exceptions for information blocking, a privacy exception, is the position of the person who's considered information blocking to say, I can't segment the data. I don't know if I have information that's part 2 in my plethora of data, so I can't really share any of it. And then on the other hand, the criteria for implementing data segmentation is optional. So it seems to me it's kind of, it doesn't encourage people to do data segmentation and may be an out for information sharing.
Yeah, I guess I can start with this one, and Rachel, if you want to chime in, you can. So I think just to level set, I believe you're talking about the infeasibility exception and not the privacy exception, which is fine. There's 8 exceptions. It's hard to keep track of that.
It was stated stated in presentations. It was one of the things that was stated with the privacy piece. So
okay, yeah. Okay, well, I guess the in the infeasibility exception, there is a provision, a condition that is not considered information blocking if you meet the condition and you're unable to fulfill the request for access, exchange, or use of electronic health information because the actor cannot unambiguously segment the requested EHI. And so, I think with looking at information blocking, generally we have to separate it from some of the certification issues that you might be talking about. Information blocking is different, and what we did with the exceptions was come up with situations when it's reasonable that folks aren't able to enable the access, exchange, or use of electronic health information. And we felt, based on comments we received, that there are situations when segmenting the data is a reasonable exception, and so we included that provision in that exception as a condition that could be met. I guess I'm not sure totally exactly how it plays with the other part of your question, but that's the information blocking answer.
Yeah, if you look at Chapel, there were supposedly 34, there's actually 30, almost 50 implementers of data segmentation from 2015. And there was only one large vendor. The rest were very small vendors, mostly behavioral health. So it doesn't seem like many of the EHR customers are going to have that capability.
Well, I guess, again, within the scope of information blocking, we also have the content and manner exception, which enables, if you're unable to provide the information in the manner requested, it might not go to the segmentation question. I guess maybe it could. There's other opportunities to get the data out. But I'm not sure if others from ONC can really speak to the Chapel issue that we're talking about.
Can you describe that issue again? I might be able to help.
Chapel has a list of the implementers who were certified for data segmentation at the header level. I think it's 2015 edition. And when you look at the set, there were several products from Allscripts that were certified. All of the rest are very small vendors, mostly in the behavioral health set. So if nobody has an EHR that can do this, then, and many times they mix the data because they don't always know it's part 2 or state, especially protected under state law, and they might all find it infeasible.
Right, so you're saying, I'm having trouble understanding the question. So you're wondering why this is a privacy exception when only a small number of developers have the capability to do this today?
either it's privacy or it's an infeasibility one. So I don't want to take up too much time, but it
yeah,
sounds like
I think that I am going to jump in here and say I do want to point out that in the information blocking world, we speak to whether you have the technical capability to sequester and deal with the data in a different way. Not necessarily whether the way you have to sequester pieces of information from other types of information is dependent on particular standards or particular criteria, such as the standards that we call S for P that are a specific standard way of tagging data. If there is another way that you have to identify a class of information that should not be shared or that you cannot legally share for whatever reason, from the information that you can and perhaps should be sharing, then you have that capability. Information blocking is not looking for you to have or not have an ability to do the function according to particular technical standards.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. So here someone wants to know, as a question around non-certified health IT with regard to information blocking, to what extent does the infeasibility exception apply to providers using that non-certified health IT?
Can the person asking the question maybe give a little more background on what they're asking? Because I'm not totally clear.
Justin? Is Justin here?
Yeah, sure. So just envisioning a case in which a provider, again, using non-certified IT, like an non-certified EHR, is unable to fulfill a request for EHI, due to they're using that non-certified health IT, and maybe this question relates to the answer of the previous question, but are they, as a provider actor, are they covered by the infeasibility exception in any way?
Well, so again, I'll start and others can jump in, I guess. With information blocking, it's looking more at the practices that these actors are, involved in, and practices mean, what kind of actions they're taking. And so we talked a lot in the rule about how it's not limited to certified technology, it's broader than that and looks at the conduct of the actor in question. So I guess with every situation with information blocking, you have to go through, and I'm not sure if you've attended any of our webinars, but we have a slide that we present every time that goes through the different elements for information blocking. So there's a number of questions you would really want to ask to see if whether you might be, interested in whether you're information blocking or someone else might be. And that's, you'd look at whether you're an actor covered by the rule. So you'd look at the definitions of actors for provider, healthcare provider, health IT developer of certified health IT, health information network or health information exchange. You also look at whether there's electronic health information as defined in our rule involved. You'd want to look at whether the intent was there, this knowledge standard that's in the Cures Act for providers, which is different than for health IT developers of certified health IT, and HINs and HIEs. And then also whether there's an existing law that would be applicable, or if there's an exception that comes into play. So I think, it's tough to answer some of these questions because that's really the checklist that you have to go through to determine whether information blocking is going on. I don't know, do others have any thoughts, Rachel?
I'll just add that if you look in the rule and read the question was about providers. If you read the definition in the rule of healthcare provider as an actor, it doesn't depend on whether you are using certified or not certified health IT. It looks at how you're using what you do have.
And one other thing to note, if you look up the definition of certified health IT developer or health IT developer of certified health IT, in order for the developer to be an actor, they have to have at least one product certified at the time when the conduct took place. So that's kind of how it ties in certification for that definition, but again, it's broader than just the certified health IT.
Thank you, Mark. Isaac's pointing out, I guess, or asking about maybe an inconsistency around the smart spec, an inconsistency between the smart spec and the rule around the JSON web key set URI. Isaac, can you explain can you?
Yeah, and it's not actually about the rule, it's about the recently published certification test plan.
Okay.
So I think it's on G10VB, the step 4, the one of the certification test plan steps has the tester verify that they can access and retrieve, that the authorization server can access and retrieve like a TLS certificate from the app in order to do as part of like the Smart on FHIR backend services stuff. But the underlying smart spec actually like has 2 options for it and heavily recommends the one that you guys are requiring via the via that test plan. But the actual base spec and in the regulation, like it doesn't seem there should be 2 options there instead of just 1. And I know this is a super nitpicky little thing. I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's great. And this is,
talk to you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the test procedure is available online, so it's published in Final, but we're absolutely looking to see if anybody has any errors or anything they need to point out, please let us know, and we can correct those. So the way that I believe this is one part of the specification that may be improved in the future. So the bulk IG doesn't clearly always specify all of the server shell requirements versus all of the client shell requirements. And so if you read this, for consistency and implementation, the client's JWK shall be shared with the FHIR server using one of the following techniques. And if the client is able to share via either the URL to JWK set or the JWK set directly, this implies that the server needs to support both. So we only test currently in Inferno the strongly preferred method, the URL to JWK set, and we just did not implement the JWK set directly, the strongly discouraged method in the test procedure. So,
and John, it warms my heart that you went to that level of that. There was actually, that was a conscious decision.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm totally like, and I think that I remember when Josh wrote that language, and like it makes sense from a security point of view. I'm just trying to figure out, like, we don't actually support the JWKS URL yet. And
right.
So we're trying to figure out when, and our interpretation of the spec is that it's not required. And we'll give some feedback, but that's something that's on our roadmap. We're just trying to figure out when. So let me ask one more question then and hijack, sure, because you're answering at this level of like expertise.
Yeah.
Why core capabilities? Like the core capabilities are not core. Like, and I know that that's HL7, our fault within HL7 for naming them that. But like, and you know, a good 70% of them are solidly core. But the other 30, like need patient banner and the style stuff is also marked as experimental. And did you guys just like say, hey, nothing's actually required in the spec, therefore we got to make something required, and here's a bundle of things we can make required? Was that just a convenience thing? Did you guys overbook the style and some of those other weirder things, like the launch, some of the launch pickers, or like what was the thought process for that?
Yeah, there were a number of reasons. So one is that we didn't want to name all of the independent features inside of regulation. So as the standards version advancement process is put into place and all of these standards are updated, the less that we're able to name in regulation, the better. And then two, I mean, they were named core capabilities. So, you know, if the standards body labeled them core capabilities for Smart on FHIR, we didn't want to like, you know, parse out the individual ones that we felt were core capabilities. So I will point out that some of them are not being tested in the test procedure, particularly, I believe it's encounter, some encounter context. And that's because the search level or the encounter resource does not need to be supported at the search level interaction. It only needs to be supported at the read level interaction. So it gets a little detailed in that. But then also the context banner and context style are, you know, it's usually like it's one document. And, you know, we felt since it was a labeled a core capability, and then it seemed like the implementation would be fairly superficial. And ONC has gotten a lot of flack in the past for not focusing on usability. We felt that, you know, it was a simple thing to include. So.
Thank you. That's a great answer. So can I ask one more question then, and then
Yep.
I'll let other people. So do you expect that HL7 will iterate? So like there's right now there's the Argonaut granular controls project happening this year that's actively like trying to figure out how we can improve Smart on FHIR scoping language. There's also might be a few other kind of updates, refresh improvements to that underlying smart spec, causing that spec version to increment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so is that something that you guys will actually consider as part of the SFAP process before the actual enforcement period begins?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the G10 CCG, we've made it clear that Health IT developers are permitted to present like the smart authorization scopes in like a number of different formats to make it easier for the end user to read, as long as the ability to select based on the FHIR resource level scopes is available if requested. And so there's some inherent flexibility. If the Health IT developers individually come up with a better way to like display and explain those scopes, that's great. Because obviously the FHIR resource level scopes are incomprehensible to the end user. So that, you know, we wanted the function there to exist where the patient is able to authorize based on resource level scopes. But yeah, I think the Argonaut project is fantastic, and we'll certainly be looking to that in any way that we can point to it. I mean, potentially with the standards revision advancement process, if the national coordinator approves any like advanced versions of that, or if there's any way we can say in the CCG, you know, like this is a great effort, like we recommend coalescing around a industry standard.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Isaac, as well. I have a number of questions around Arch. And then there's comment that Arch was dropped from the rule. And this is confirmed by Matt Rahn, who's also here. Does it mean that, is it Sheila, that your question is no longer relevant? Or Sheila, maybe you can.
You know, I didn't know that Arch was dropped from the rule. So I just learned that today, if that's true. But I was just wondering, before I just heard that, if the 2019 version 1 was the current version. So was it dropped, or why was it dropped, or they're no longer trying to map USCDI to FHIR resources?
I can take that, or Al, you know, feel free to you know, speak up. So we decided to not rely on these Arch to map between the USCDI and FHIR. So before, this was a listing of resources that we that we named as a mapping, but we realized that
Right.
industry was already doing this work and it was duplicative.
Who was already doing it?
The US core mapping for that.
Oh, okay. The
Yeah, so if you
FHIR
look at
US
the US
core.
core. Yeah, FHIR US core. Yeah, so if you look at the FHIR US core, it's a little confusing because it's US core and US CDI. They're similar names, but if you look at the US core IG that's referenced in the regulation, that has a mapping between US CDI and US core.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. I'm going to jump a question here and come back later. This is probably a question for Stefan on FAST. I would like
Hi,
to express
Ren,
the need for a, yeah.
I can jump in.
Okay,
Stefan,
good.
it's my continual request and pain around a payer ID in the work that we need to be able to do in identifiers. I know it's part of the Tiger team, but I just wanted to reiterate again, we keep trying to represent a payer in both CCDA and in FHIR format, and the way it's done with administrative simplification is clearinghouses have IDs, and most of the large payers will have an NAIC identifier that they use. But I've learned from our internal resources that work in the clearinghouse that other people have just made up their identifier, and sometimes there are collisions around these identifiers. And so it's really challenging still yet in the X12 world, but we need an identifier even more importantly as we move forward with the CMS regulations and things like that that address the payer. And Stefan's heard this before, but I just had to reiterate because my pain is still very real.
Yes, we very much are aware of your constant advocacy for that. And so for those who aren't as familiar, one of the Tiger teams, there's several Tiger teams that this potentially could fall underneath in the FAST work, but one of the ones that I think has been discussed at, and I don't think they have a determination yet, is under the directory Tiger team, where they're looking at establishing a national solution for a federated directory of FHIR endpoints. And so one of those things is what goes into the metadata for identifying those endpoints and potentially having those payer identification as being a part of that seems to make sense. So obviously, Linda's part of FAST. She's part of the effort. She's on the coordinating committee and continues to bring that up, and we're glad she does. There's a lot of other payers that are involved in that effort as well. So I'm sure we will do our best to try to address it.
And just a reminder, most of the payers use the WEDI insurance card specification, and the last specification that was done there still points, I think, work that was around an old plan ID that got killed off maybe 6 months ago or so now. And so it's not quite correct, but whatever identifier we use has to somehow make it back to the card that the patient is carrying, so that, the two are associated. So you got to talk to me more often, Stefan, in person, and I wouldn't have to ask you on the calls. Thanks.
No
Stefan.
worries, no worries. Thank you for bringing it up again.
Right. Next question. Where can I find a crosswalk that maps each of the CMS quality measures to an ONC regulation or requirement? So comparison between CMS and ONC. Is that one for you, Kate, or? Not sure.
It might be for me. So if you look at the CMS QRDA site, I'm assuming this is referring to like the C criteria. Is that correct?
This is Sheila again. I work with Linda, so we're both bugging you today. So there are different clinical quality measures, like I'm just looking at some numbers in front of me, CMS 127, CMS 134. Which of the ONC certification criteria do the different clinical quality measures map to? So if I look at, 173.15A2 for CPOE laboratory, which clinical quality measures are satisfied with that requirement? Or where is there some sort of map?
Yeah, so the clinical quality measures that are represented by the CMS QRDA files are contained within like the C3 criteria. So you can look to that one. We actually revised it in the final rule to refer specifically to the CMS QRDA implementation guide, which is based on the HL7 version 2 standard. Or sorry, the CDA release 2 standard. And the other C criteria are based on the HL7 CDA release 2 standard, the QRDA category 1 and category 3. But we also state in the CCG for the C criteria that Health IT developers can certify to the CMS QRDA implementation guides. And the actual CMS QRDA implementation guides are based, and the schematrons, sorry, are based on the CMS ECQMs for that reporting period, if that makes sense. So like they do the mapping, we don't have any, we don't do any mapping work in the certification criteria.
Okay. All right. I guess where I sort of came up with this idea was that I think I downloaded from the Certified Health IT product list, I downloaded like a spreadsheet, and it was showing for a vendor product version, it was showing, a column of certification criteria and a column of clinical quality measures. But I guess it's not going to attempt a one-to-one matching.
So Sheila, this is Al. I think I can maybe flesh out a little bit of what Johnny said. So different EHRs will certify to different numbers, different ECQMs. All of those ECQMs use the same specs, and depending on whether or not they're an EH or an EC, they're going to certify to different ECQMs. The standards are the same, the certification to those standards are the same, which are the C criteria that Johnny was talking about. So an EHR gets to pick based on their, their clientele, mostly if they're an inpatient EHR or an outpatient EHR, or if they're a comprehensive EHR that takes care of everything everywhere, they'll certify to different numbers of ECQMs. But they're all, the certification standard criteria are going to be to, are they going to be the same criteria and the same testing requirements. It's just that to the extent that there's testing for each individual ECQM they certify to, they are going to certify using to the same standard and the same test method. I think that's right, Johnny?
Okay, thank you so much. I feel much more knowledgeable about the ONC rule, and soon I'll be confident about CMS. I hope.
Best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So Sheila, I hope you joined the CMS session earlier today.
Yes, I did.
Were you? Okay, good. Hi, Virginia. I see you're also here, and you're asking about the timing of the EHI and USCDI. Can you maybe elaborate a bit on your question? Or do you want me to read it out loud? Virginia? Okay, I'll read the question. Why isn't the info blocking timeframe in which EHI is scoped to include all EHI, not just USCDI, aligned with the vendor rollout of EHI export technology?
Yeah, I guess I can take this one. So I mean, again, it's important to put information blocking on one side and kind of the certification criteria in another bucket. And with information blocking, what we're talking about is the data elements included in the US CDI standard. And so for the first 2 years from publication, under information blocking, the EHI would be those data elements. So not looking at the standard itself, but the actual data included. And so that's how we're looking at it for information blocking. And then after the 2-year period, it would be the full scope of EHI as defined in our rule.
I think we lost Virginia. Oh, you're here.
This is Linda. No, this is Linda. Oh. But could I follow up on that and say, I get asked all the time, what constitutes the opposite of information blocking that's being required? And so I know it's, like you said, the first 2 years it's US CDI, and I believe it's format agnostic. But what other pieces? I've been looking for nice fact sheets or slides that I can share internally to communicate that. And so far I haven't found one readily.
I guess I'm not sure what you mean by the opposite of information. I guess the opposite of information blocking is
information sharing, like what sharing, yeah. You're right, what sharing is intended. And I've been asked that often, like, I know, like people say, does it have to be FHIR? No, it doesn't have to be FHIR, but I'm just looking for something that succinctly says what it is that is required for them to do as opposed to not do.
Right, so I guess I probably don't have an answer that's gonna really give you, solace, but I mean, I think what we say is, the framework we're working under is that the default is really that this information should be moving unless there's a really good reason that it should not, such as privacy, security, an existing law. You just can't do it due to technical capabilities, those types of things. So the idea is that we want the data to move as much as possible, but we understand that there are lots of circumstances that we laid out in the rule that make it so that it's reasonable that sometimes it would not.
Low time limit warning.
Okay. Someone wants to turn on their camera for a final question, or I have a few more here. Okay, there's a question here. To what extent can an actor develop privacy security requirements for connecting to non-HIPAA apps on the info blocking rule?
Hey guys, that's me. Good to see you all.
Nice.
Hey guys. So for those who don't know, I'm now in New York. I'm working at the New York eHealth Collaborative, and we operate the statewide health information network of New York. So we basically act as like a trust framework for 6 regional health information exchanges across New York, kind of like a QHIN. And so I have a question probably for you, Mark, and I know you're probably just going to tell me it has to be on a case-by-case basis, but I'll ask you anyways. So right now in our policies and procedures, we have specific requirements around like what types of non-HIPAA entities can connect to us. Right now it's limited to CBOs, consumer-based organizations, and we have really specific requirements around like what privacy and security things they have to adhere to. So I guess to what extent under information blocking, as long as our policies and procedures are, non-discriminatory and transparent, et cetera, can we have those kind of more specific requirements around who can connect to our network and, what rules they have to adhere to?
Yeah, I mean, I guess pretty much, I guess I'd say it does depend on the facts and circumstances. I mean, in the privacy exception, we do, have a sub-exception that has to do with Health IT developers who certified Health IT not covered by HIPAA, but I think that's different than what you're talking about, perhaps. I know, Rachel, do you have any thoughts on this one?
I think it's one of those questions that in this small amount of time, I would say you correctly predicted. It's a case-by-case analysis and looking at, for example, the security exception and how what you're doing bumps up against being appropriately tailored, specifically responding to a particular threat, how it might run up against some of the other exceptions that are in there. But yeah, I think it's case by case of exactly what you might be doing and how that plays against the rule.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And, you know, I think there are these overarching themes that we have throughout information blocking about, you know, being non-discriminatory, being objective, and treating everyone fairly. So, I mean, again, we just have to be case by case, and you have to look at the exceptions to see, you know, what applies.
Okay, Zoe, thank you for your final question. And I would also like to thank all the ONC people to be here and answering questions. We're a little bit over time, and we can just join the wrap up of day 3. So thank you all, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.